Chapter 2. The Making of a Clown Killer. Roderick followed Kathy into an ordinary-looking suburban house, complete with worn furniture that, even when it was new, probably looked like holdovers from the 1970s. The two walked through a room with an old floral-patterned couch, CRT television set, and a prominent velvet painting of Alex Trebek on the wall, into a kitchen with a pea-green refrigerator, macrame curtains, and a spacious dining room table, eventually stopping before a large vault-like basement door. It's pretty much an ordinary house, but it has a few security measures that we modified and improved on, Kathy explained. Is the owner still here? Asked Roderick. No sign of him. Probably twisting balloon animals now. Kathy slid aside a panel on the door and entered an electronic code explaining that the door lock, while not particularly hard to hack, was beyond the technical expertise of the garden variety bozo. The door led down a flight of stairs and into a surprisingly well-lit but cluttered room. Here, one man worked with an impressive display of switches and dials at what appeared to be a complex but jury-rigged radio, while another sat bent over a workbench in the back, assembling a series of circuits and wires. Finally, two others sat before an aged VCR TV combo watching an old rerun of Mr. Belvedere, specifically the episode where Heather wants to become a cheerleader. All eyes fell on Kathy as she entered. "Guys, I brought a visitor. Roderick, meet the team." The man at the radio removed his headset. He was a thin character in a plaid shirt and thick-rimmed glasses. He had a beard that looked well-maintained despite its owner living in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. "Kathy," exclaimed the bearded flannel wearer as he rose from his seat, "what are you thinking? Like, you can't just literally invite some stranger in—" "Don't worry, Ian. He's an old friend. You can trust him. Roderick, this is Ian. He's our comm officer. He uses this radio to stay in touch with me when I'm out and about looking for supplies or doing recon." Ian snorted. "Looks like some holdover from the 1980s. Alpha males are a thing of the past." "You're about to be a thing of the past, kid," Roderick growled through his teeth. "There'll be time for that later, boys," said Kathy. "And this over here is James." She gestured to the young man at the workbench. He wore a sleeveless white t-shirt, which exposed skinny arms, and about his head a bandana rolled into a makeshift headband. "James is the one responsible for constructing some of the gadgets and devices we use to keep ourselves safe. He's a technical wizard. Say hi, James." "Hey, who's this jive-ass turkey?" James said, rising haughtily from his seat. "Excuse me?" asked Roderick, both irritated and confused. Kathy quickly stepped forward to explain. "James is a bit lacking in the social skills department. In order to learn how to interact with people, he watches TV and movies, except most of what he's watched are sci-fi and action features from the 80s. As such, his social persona only conforms to crude racial stereotypes from that era." James dropped his gaze to the ground, suddenly looking crestfallen. "I have no noteworthy personality to speak of." Kathy continued her introductions. "Over here is Neil." A tall blond man strode forward with his hand outstretched. "Hi, pleased to meet you," he said. "What did he say?" Roderick said sideways to Kathy as he shook Neil's hand. "You got me. He's Canadian," said Kathy with a shrug. "I don't speak Canadian," Roderick replied. "None of us do. We all just sort of have to guess at what he's trying to say." "Oh, come on," Neil said. "It's Canada. We speak the same language as you. I'm speaking to you in fluent English right now." Everyone in the room grew silent as an indecipherable admixture of trills, grunts, clicks, and whistles poured forth from the Canadian's mouth, every ear straining to make sense of the nonsensical dialect. "Gibberish to me," Roderick said at length. "Yup," agreed Ian. "Complete gibberish," said Kathy. "His speech is largely indiscernible," James chimed in. Neil sighed resignedly. "Sorry for the outburst," he said with a shrug. "Well, anyway, that's our team," Kathy said, letting her hands fall to her side as she grinned with satisfaction. "Pretty good crew, huh?" "Wait," Roderick said. "What about that other guy?" He indicated to the nondescript man with whom Neil the Canadian had been watching TV. Kathy looked slightly embarrassed. "Oh, I almost forgot. This is Harvey." Harvey, of whom Roderick could find no noteworthy distinguishing features, walked forward to introduce himself. "So, what about you, son?" said Roderick. Harvey replied, "What do you mean? You're not a hipster, you're not a sometimes jive-talking stereotype savant, you're not Canadian. I'm Harvey," he shrugged simply. Kathy clarified, "Yep, Harvey is Harvey." Harvey is Harvey, agreed the others in unison. Once everyone was introduced, Roderick thought for a minute, scowling. So, he said at length, you all take turns venturing outside, or what? Well, no, that's sort of my job, Kathy said. What? Roderick was incredulous. You mean all you boys sit down here in the dark, playing with your toys, probably looking at weird Japanese cartoon porn while a lady goes out to do all the dirty work? What kind of men are you? Like, I take objection to that, Ian began. I mean, this isn't the 1950s anymore. His argument was cut off by Roderick, who had broken into a bizarre sort of dance. Roderick skipped about, flapping his arms like wet noodles. His voice was weirdly high-pitched as he sang, I'm a little girly man, I'm too afraid to go outside 'cause I'm a little girly man. You can't rhyme words with themselves, Ian protested. Roderick glowered at the room. What's the matter? Did your mothers get clowned, and now you don't have anyone to clean up your rooms for you, so you make Kathy here do all your dirty work? Ian retorted. Like, I fully believe in letting women demonstrate their strength. Speak for yourself, Beefbone, but I'm secure enough with my masculinity that I don't need to literally put on false pretenses. Wait a minute, Kathy said. Roderick's right. I never thought about it before, but you guys are a real bunch of wimps, you know that? I mean, at first I thought you were kind of sweet in a pitiful sort of way, just a bunch of big kids who needed someone more mature to look after them, but now I see you're all just a bunch of wimps. Well, I'm not too proud to admit it when I've been duped, but I'm also not stupid enough to let it keep happening. Not after Roy. That jerk told me he loved me, but he was just using me for my Costco membership. Well, no more. From now on, if you boys want something from outside, you're going to start having to pull equal duty. Neil stepped up from the recliner. I hate to admit it, but they're right, he said to the others. I always lied to myself, told myself Kathy was the most capable among us, and so the best of us to do the hard work, but the reality of it was I was just too scared to go out there myself. Well, no more. Starting today, I'm going to be doing city runs as well. He picked up a nearby revolver and tried spinning the cylinder, then snapping it into place. All the bullets spilled out of the weapon and jingled across the floor. Roderick replied, Gretzky, I don't have a clue what you just said, but I like your attitude. Starting today, I'm turning you from a syrup-guzzling Nancy boy into a finely tuned clown-killing machine. Now, as for you other buttercups, you can continue sitting down here eating spaghetti out of a giant plastic bowl while surreptitiously masturbating to Japanese cartoon characters until you decide to become real men. I don't eat spaghetti from a bowl, and I don't eat spaghetti from a bowl, snapped Ian, standing with renewed anger. James glanced back and forth between Ian and Roderick. After a few minutes, he rose from his workbench. I, too, wish to become a clown-killing machine, he said. And me, said Harvey nondescriptly. Roderick replied, Great, fantastic. We'll get started in a bit, but I'm hungry first. You folks have any of that bowl spaghetti sitting around? We usually eat canned food, Roderick. There's no such thing as bowl spaghetti, said Kathy. Well, then what else would you call spaghetti in a bowl? Nobody eats that. Sure they do. They don't. Oh. In the days that followed, Roderick began a rigid training regimen designed to turn the boys in the basement from turtles into lions with a taste for clown flesh. The first day was weapons training. Everyone had gathered in a nearby vacant lot strewn with trash, human skulls, and party balloons, a typical combination of sights in the post-apocalyptic world. Now, the first thing to keep in mind is that you need to kill a clown in the least funny way possible. A good example is with arrows. You shoot a clown in the throat with a crossbow and that'll work just fine. There's nothing funny about being shot in the throat. They'll gurgle and cough blood like anyone else. But you shoot an arrow through a clown's head and, well, it just doesn't work as well as you'd think. It's like a joke to them, like some gag you'd order out of the back of an old Boy Scout magazine back in the 80s. So whenever you kill a clown, try to think unfunny. What about acetone? Said Harvey. Acetone? Roderick repeated. Yeah, I have a theory that clowns are weak against it. I mean, think about it. It dissolves things like glue, paint, stuff like that. So it probably works pretty well against the clowns. Well, if you manage to find a few liters of acetone, you can give it a try. How's that? Anyway, they're also kind of hard to kill by dropping heavy things on them. You do that, and they just turn into an accordion shape and walk away. No good. So I found the best way to kill them are the most basic. Guns, blades, bludgeoning. Harvey asked, what about explosives? They usually work, James interrupted. I have experimented with them. Often they kill clowns, but sometimes the clowns just turn into charred versions of their former selves. Shrapnel bombs seem to work best, or landmines. Nothing funny about unexploded landmines, Roderick said dourly. Wait, said Ian, who was watching from nearby with his signature scowl. Like, one thing I've literally never understood with this whole clown apocalypse thing is, if clowns are so bent on spreading nonsense and unfunny jokes, why is it they like killing and eating people? I mean, like, death isn't that funny, is it? Well, that's the whole point, Roderick said. They like to seem as though their goal is to be funny, in a ham-fisted way. But underneath it all is a sense of abject cruelty and contempt for mankind. You remember that guy who worked as a part-time charity clown but ended up killing people and stashing them in the crawl space under his house, right? It's like that. Also, I suspect the whole jokes and gags thing is something they kind of get off on. The others looked back at him blankly for a few moments. Like, sexually, Roderick elaborated. The others continued to remain silent. Like their weird striped red-tipped clown penises getting Okay, that's enough, said Ian. I get the idea. Roderick continued. Anyway, what were we talking about? Landmines, reminded Harvey. Landmines. Oh yeah, chainsaws work great too. Anyway, let's start with baseball bats. They might not have the range of firearms, but they're easy to find and they don't need bullets. Now, I know it's tempting to just walk up to a red nose and beat the silly out of it, but there's actually a way to hold the bat for maximum effectiveness. Roderick walked up to Neil and placed the bat in his hands. Do you speak English? He asked the Canadian. Neil sighed. Yes, I speak English. You don't need to talk to me like I'm 3 years old. Hold the bat. Hold the bat. Neil sighed again. Roderick directed each of the men on how to strike at clowns using a practice dummy made from an old garbage can with bullseyes painted on various vital points and, for realism, a clown mask on top. Okay, hit the clown, Harvey, Roderick directed his student. Harvey bonked the dummy with an awkward blow. That wouldn't do anything, Roderick chastised. All that would do is raise a cartoonishly large lump on the Joker's head, which he'd just push back down again with his finger. Harder! Again, Harvey attempted a meek attack. Are you trying to kill it or give it a massage? Again, another ungainly hit. That clown killed someone you love. Finally, all the stress boiled over, and Harvey unleashed a mighty blow with the entirety of his weight behind the strike. The dummy clown's head went flying, but Harvey continued beating on the effigy for several seconds. I hated the circus as a kid, cried Harvey. Then, when his fury had subsided, he turned to face Roderick. And I hate football, Coach Sims. He dropped the bat and walked away. Looks like Harvey's got some unresolved issues, Neil muttered to James. Firearms training was next. Roderick taught the men how to steady their aim and how to shoot for center mass instead of the head, which was a common mistake with rookies. James proved to be a fairly decent shot, managing to hit several targets in a row, sending the can spinning off into the distance. Oh yeah, nothing but net, he exclaimed. The others just looked at him. Good job, James, but watch the quips. That performance pleased me, James corrected himself. Roderick proceeded to teach the men how to use all variety of weapons, how to swing axes to maximize lethality and minimize the chance of a blade getting stuck in a clown's skull, what to look for in a good improvised weapon, and, lastly, how to use hand-to-hand combat when all else failed. Well, I've got a question, said Harvey. What do you do if a clown has you pinned to the ground, and it's all like, "Rrrr," and you're all like, ah, ah, ah? Oh, said Roderick simply, that's easy. Come here and I'll show you. Roderick positioned himself on the ground with Harvey atop his prone form. Now, imagine you're the clown and you're trying to bite me or whatever. All I need to do is grab your arm, then use my leg to block your other leg, thrust my hips up, and... Roderick reversed the position, flipping Harvey over, then rolling atop the nondescript young man. Ta-da! Wow, amazing, James marveled. Sure was, Harvey agreed. Wow, if we hadn't met you, Roderick, who knows how long we would have gone without learning that very basic self-defense move. Maybe 10 seasons, years or more. Roderick brushed off the praise. Well, give yourselves some credit, boys. It's a pretty basic technique. If you managed to survive for 10 whole seasons, years, you'd probably figure it out yourself at some point. You're not total numbskulls, right? Roderick laughed, and the others laughed along with him. When the day came to a close, a small sense of satisfaction fell over Roderick. The boys needed practice, but showed potential, and he found he didn't totally mind being wrong about his initial prediction that they were a bunch of hopeless daffodils. Ian, however, seemed less than pleased, continuing to regard the situation with a frown. The next day involved physical fitness. Here, Roderick addressed his trainees while wearing a towel about the back of his neck and a whistle, which he had mysteriously procured from somewhere, resting on his sternum. Okay, listen up. I know you guys think you're hot stuff now that you can properly fire and maintain a gun, but the best firearms training in the world is useless if the person holding the gun is nothing but a dripping plastic bag hauled from the dumpster behind a liposuction clinic. Your body is like any other machine. It requires maintenance to function. I'm going to turn yours from plastic bags full of fat to steel bags full of testicles. Harvey looked sideways at Neil, whispering, Man, this guy really reminds me of Coach Sims. That day, Roderick took the men through a training routine. He had them do burpees, dive bombers, bear crawls, winkers, plukers and skeezers, dirty nannies, rabid bunnies, sarcastic game store owners, and inverted pectoral rowboat fly fishers. He was careful not to push them too hard, as he knew that, most likely, the pencil-armed, pot-bellied basement dwellers had bodies ill-suited to physical exertion, and that too much exercise would cause them to be sore for weeks, and so he conducted his training with a light hand. Well, that's enough for today, buttercups, Roderick said as the three trainees lay sprawled on the pavement catching their breath. Too much more and you guys will be moving like senior citizens for weeks. Let's pack her in. But no sooner had he finished this sentence than a white-skinned, red-haired face popped up in the window of a nearby house. Clown! Cried Kathy, who had been observing nearby. Back to the house! Harvey shouted. Roderick narrowed his gaze. No. This is the perfect time to try out your new skills. James, take the red nose out. You got it, my main man, James said with relish. He drew his pistol, held it just like he had seen in the movies, and aimed it at the cheerful face. Kill Whitey, he said as he pulled the trigger. Blam! Splat! The clown's head exploded in a shower of colors. Oh yeah, from downtown, cried James, looking to the others for high fives. When he met only with approving nods, he remarked, That was a well-placed shot. Several more clowns filed out of the dilapidated house. Hey, kids, who wants to have fun? One of them chortled. Blam! Blam! Harvey fired twice with a rifle. Got him! Roderick corrected him. No, you need to say something more clever than that. Come on, this is an easy one. Think. The clown said, Who wants to have fun? Oh, said Harvey suddenly. I almost forgot. He cleared his throat, then growled. I do. Good, you're getting the hang of it. All right, Celine, you're next. I know you Canadians don't know much about baseball, but go hit a home run with that last clown's skull. Neil dashed forward with bat in hand. As he approached, the bozo produced a hand-operated bike horn and pointed it at the Canadian. Look out, he's got a horn, shouted Kathy. Bang! Before the clown had a chance to use the deadly apparatus, Neil's weapon slammed on the Pierrot's head. However, the clown refused to go down. Rather, it just sat there, reeling, its tongue lolling out of its mouth. More savagery, Roderick coached. Imagine he wants to privatize health care. Neil gritted his teeth and smashed the bat several more times into the tomfool's head. The first hit seemed to knock it unconscious, while the subsequent blows shattered the skull, causing vile, colorful clown blood to ooze out. As Harvey witnessed the spectacle, he spoke out of the side of his mouth to James. That clown had a horn. Would it be appropriate to say something like, I'm not feeling horny right now? No, Roderick said, having overheard the conversation. He shouted, Nice work, trainees. I knew you had it in you. Roderick, that was dangerous, scolded Kathy. What if Neil had been a bit off with that bat? That clown would have horned him for sure. But he didn't, because I trained him. Roderick cast his cigar on the ground, stamped it out, and walked away. Where did he get that cigar from? Asked Harvey.